So, hey, please welcome to the show, Catherine Mary Stewart. Hello, how are you?
Hello, I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's so good to see you. Hey,
It's good to see you too.
we talked a couple times, a few years ago, and at the time, it wasn't this big year that it is because I'm sure you realize this now because someone told you, but you were part of what I think is the best year for cinema of all time, 1984, and you have not one, as most people do in this, that have a film out in that year, but two films that came out and celebrate their anniversaries this year.
This year specifically,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Amazing to me.
It's funny that we like pick these arbitrary, sort of anniversaries because
Mm.
we sort of acknowledge or celebrate or love the things we do every year, all the time. But 40 seems like a milestone, certainly. And of course, I'm talking about the films The Last Starfighter and Night of the Comet. Yeah.
Yay!
Now it's I was just doing some reading for another episode that we were doing on our show that how sci-fi had sort of waned. It had a sort of golden era in the 50s and 60s. It was
Mhm.
waning, and then Star Wars came out, and everybody was looking for a
Mm.
sci-fi project. And
Mm.
it's look lucky for us that you had these two. Um,
Yeah, I know. And very different really when you look at them. But yeah, it just happened to be a good era really for that kind of a sci-fi thing. And but what I love about Night of the Comet and Last Starfighter, I do feel like there is something unique about them in lots of different ways than sort of the Star Wars thing. So I'm so pleased to have been a part of both of these they start out as just little movies, and they've really been very resilient over time and I think gained audience,
mhm.
as time goes on.
Yeah, I've had a good fortune to recently speak with John Betchell, the screenwriter of Last Starfighter.
Oh,
I spoke with
yes.
Lance, your co-star, and we talked about how it's surprising to this day how it wasn't as well received as it was. Because
Mm,
by all it had all the markings of a huge success film wise, and of course, as you mentioned, it's huge now, certainly in the years. Whereas, quite honestly, I was surprised that right out of the gate, Night out of the Comet was a huge financial success.
yeah, I mean, it was a huge financial success because it was such a low budget
Sure.
movie.
Yes.
So, I mean, but also I think it did find its audience. But I think both of these movies, they really found their audience in the video era,
Mm-hmm.
when people could rent the videos. And a lot of them, they sort of fit into that little cuff of audience that um, may have had some trouble finding suitable movies, or their parents found trouble finding suitable movies for them specifically.
Sure.
And these were sort of kind of default in a way for maybe babysitting after school or something like that. But they really touched a nerve for so many people, and it just seems to have lingered all these years.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I hadn't thought of. Well, certainly Starfighter. I think of it in that way, in that it sense that they're
Mm,
very relatable characters. But yeah, Night of the Comet too. Although it's a little more out there in some regards.
yeah, right.
It's certainly the character you play and Kelly Maroney plays are they're teenagers, so it was easy to connect with them in in a similar yet different way. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, but what was interesting also about Night of the Comet is that, and honestly, I certainly didn't think of this at the time, that the lead protagonists were young women. There wasn't like this sort of dependency on some guy to take care of them. There was a guy, but we could stand up for ourselves just as well as that guy could,
Mm-hmm.
and if not better. And that had a real impact on girls and, well, boys. It's interesting because I've heard so many times in conventions how girls who saw that movie when they were young were impacted in a way that it really sort of, they felt empowered by it,
Mm-hmm.
which is so great. I love that. But guys like it too. I mean, I think there was a general mentality in Hollywood that no, you got to have the guy as the lead, and then you got to think about the audience, and boys won't like it if girls are leads. Guys loved it. Guys
Right.
loved kick-ass girls.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and it was definitely. I feel like Night of the Comet specifically crossed so many genres, which is also unique. I think it's sort of the Valley Girl teenagers, the cliche kind of Valley Girl thing going on, but they could handle Mac 10, as it turns out.
Right.
And there were zombies, so there was sort of sci-fi, there was kind of horror, there was kind of there was definitely comedy in there. All this stuff was a little bit tongue in the cheek. And so I feel like I just love that about Night of the Comet. It's so unique in that way.
Yeah. And it didn't occur to, I don't get that whole damsel in distress thing in a sense that it seems like, there's a portion of, look, I'm just going to be, I'm from the '80s, right? I grew up, I'm born in the early '70s. So
Okay.
I'm of a different generation, maybe. And I'm not going to say anything crass. I'm an evolved person, but that there are certain men who do care for that damsel in distress thing. I never got that. Why wouldn't you
Yeah.
want to
Oh,
be interested in a
interesting.
person who could take care of themselves and then together you're forced to be reckoned with? I
Hello.
just, I
I
don't
know,
get
I know,
that.
I
Yeah.
know. And I mean, it's so embedded in her culture. I think this whole idea of the guy rescuing a damsel in distress, as you say, and girls cling to that as well. They love that, all the princess stories and all those other things. It seems so romantic, and we grow up as girls, thinking that's what our ideal is. And it's really fun to be a part of something where, yeah, not so much.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And it's, and at the time, certainly we had some examples, especially I'm thinking about Sigourney Weaver's character in Alien not too long before
Sure.
that. But there
Of
aren't a
course.
whole lot. And we did see more
Mhm.
throughout the 1980s, but you're right. Most of it was that
Mm.
sort of, you had to have a certain look, and that was usually like Arnold Schwarzenegger. And then, that became sort of the archetype. And,
Right.
I thought worse on those because I was like, there's no chance I'm going to look like that.
You're right, 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 right.
Relate more to the
Yeah,
women.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even I mean, I love the first Alien, I have to say,
Yeah.
and I have no interest in seeing other aliens,
Okay.
because I thought that was such a brilliant, original, unique film on so many levels. It was really groundbreaking for its time. And Sigourney Weaver, I mean, it was futuristic, but she was definitely a relatable woman, And I think, like now, with the superheroes and all that stuff, it's like, it's great. It's great that the girls are being superheroes, but it's almost like they are sort of being kind of what their male counterparts are,
Mm,
as opposed to,
I see.
you know what I mean? Something instead of being just like sincerely just female, because we're different. And yay, I'm so like we should celebrate our differences. And I mean, I don't know. That's just sort of my feeling. It's like, okay, so the girl superheroes are muscular and they can do all these things that were sort of established as boys. And that's, I guess it's fine. It's great. It's a fantasy. But I just love the idea of movies being more sort of grounded in reality and relatable for the audience. And especially in the case of something like Night of the Comet and also Last Starfighter, of course, because I feel like those characters are very relatable because they're not some prince from outer space 3,000 years in the future. They're like Lance played a kid in a trailer park and I was his girlfriend in the trailer park.
Right.
And similarly, Night of the Comet, we're just a couple of goofy girls that hated school and hated our stepmom. And and I think that's sort of relatable, so I love that part.
Yeah. And to your point, right, there's so many tropes that are sort of covered in one sense in the film Night of the Comet, I'm thinking, but in the same sense, it was more realistic with regard to gender, I suppose, because more realistic because you're right. We have some things that we think of more feminine or more masculine, but there's so much overlap. I mean, to have your character be wanting to
Sure.
be this ace at a video game, which, again, even today they think is the purview of male men more than women, which isn't true.
Sure. Right.
Maybe it is, but just a little bit more. And Kelly's character is a cheerleader, but you still both kick butt. And oh yeah, you're right. That's wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, she might be sort of the more traditional kind of thing, but she plays that character so
Yeah,
well. It just makes me laugh even thinking about it because the costume, and she's just sort of like chewing gum, and she just is like, I don't care about anything, and she's in this like bright pink and blue
yeah,
thing. And then the next shot is her in her like bright yellow bodysuit, and
right.
she's slapping. slapping her stepmom around. I was, or our stepmom slapped her.
Right.
It was just funny and sort of unapologetic, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah, this is, I think you can relate to it on some level.
Yeah.
I thought it was great. I love Tom Eberhardt, the writer director. I
Right.
mean, I just thought he came up with this brilliant concept. And he tells the story about how, when he thought of this, he loves the whole kind of end of the world genre sort of a thing, apocalyptic thing.
Right.
He loves that genre. And when he came up with this idea about two young women, you know, or teenagers, teenage girls, sort of being the last people left after this kind of apocalypse, what would they do? And so he interviewed girls of that age, and they, as opposed to like, oh no, what are we going to do? Being frightened and scared of the prospect of being alone, they just thought it was the best thing ever. You know, you mean our parents aren't here to tell us what to do? We can like go shopping back in the days when you shopped at the mall and
Right.
stuff like that. Um, and that's what clicked and made this movie so different as
Wow.
opposed to what you sort of generally believe would happen is, and in most, you know, kind of apocalyptic end of the earth movies, everybody's freaking out or partying like maniacs because they know that the end of the earth is coming, or the girls are just helpless and
Right.
whatever, blah blah blah. You can go on and on, but that is the hook to me.
Right. Wow. And I hadn't heard that story. And now hearing that, you could see how obviously it played such a role or an influence in actually the screenplay because it touches on those
Yeah.
different themes that he learned. That's really cool.
I
Um,
know, yeah.
yeah. And I guess I must say, and I just did something here. What did I do that changed the volume here? There we go. Um, even now I'm trying to bring both films in here. And I didn't think we were going to talk about
Okay, oh, for
gender
sure.
roles in science fiction, but hey, this is cool. I like
Hey,
this. I dig this. Um,
we're spontaneous.
but when I talked to Lance, I talked to him about how relatable his character was, and I guess being a teenager around the age that he was, and his character was that sort of thing. When I saw it, but one of the things is I really felt for his character because of how much he loved your character, Maggie. And as a teenager wrestling with first loves and stuff like that, I could feel the tension of
uh,
how independent Maggie was. Again, it was this.
mm,
It's scary because
yeah,
his character is going to go off and do something, and you're leaving this world behind, and maybe it's gone for good. And
right.
but I think part of that was your character that you weren't this character that was just beholden to the man and just hanging on, and you both had sort
Yeah.
of you wanted to be together, but so in that way too, I feel like that was maybe a fairer or more realistic sort of portrayal.
Right. I mean, and also he sort of gave her, it wasn't like you have to come with me, or well, it sort of was, but he gave her the option. It was like he knew this was his path, and if
Right.
he invited her to come, so it was her decision. And of course she hesitated at first because she lived this very sort of enclosed life in this little trailer park in the middle of nowhere, and the prospect of getting into this
Yep.
spaceship and with a lizard and flying off to outer space, it was, yeah, it's a little intimidating,
Yeah.
but um yeah, I mean, they had that kind of relationship. She trusted that he was making, a wise decision for the two of them, and also I think you're right that she knew that she could look after herself ultimately as well.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's just these ordinary kids in this extraordinary situation, and I just feel like it creates a sense of possibility for kids when they watch that stuff.
Sure.
Probably not going to save the universe in outer space, but you just need to. I mean, there's so many lines in the movie that reference sort of, if it's there, grab onto it and just go for it.
Right.
And I always told my children, without you know getting into some sort of a dangerous situation,
Right.
if it scares you, it's probably worth going
Mm.
for, because those are the kind of things that it may or may not work out, but if it works out, it just, speaking of empowerment, man, it really empowers you to like realize possibilities in your life. So, but you have to be open to possibilities. You have to, when they present themselves, you have to be open to them. And you see Alex struggle with that in the movie. You know, he's like, "Are you crazy? I'm not going to do this crazy thing." And eventually he sort of gets tricked into going into the car, but whatever that thing is, the DeLorean.
Right. Right.
But you know, he struggles with the concept of doing something that's so overwhelming, and especially kids that age, even going to college, you know, is like, yeah, that's what you do, but it can be overwhelming. It can be very scary. And same with Maggie when she eventually goes. You know, she has to make that choice to take a chance, even if it's scary.
Yep.
But again, ultimately, the rewards for taking those kind of chances are so worth it.
Yeah.
Make life fun and interesting and expand. It expands your world.
Yeah, yeah, and the fact that he did it began with I remember feeling excited and encouraged by it because the fact that it began with him doing, or the path to this was doing something mundane. You know, it
Yes.
wasn't like Luke Skywalker on a planet imagining fighting a battle with the Galactic Empire. No, he just did a regular
Right.
kid thing and
Right.
mastered it, and it led to opportunities.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's, you know, it's a really sweet, simple movie in a way, but at the same time, it really explores the complexity of what kids at that turning point in their life, they have to navigate. And it's hard.
hmm
Um, and so that's, you know, that's really what it's all about in terms of the audience and the kids relating to it. Yeah.
So when I talked to Lance, he said that he
Mhm.
folks are most recognize him for his horror work. You know, his
Yeah.
Halloween 2, in particular, Jaws.
Mhm.
4 that he was in. Folks, you see, we have more fans from Last Starfighter or Night of the Comet.
That would be pretty even.
Okay,
Yeah, I would say because it's a very, very similar audience, and a lot of the people that have seen Last Starfighter have seen Night of the Comet as well, and vice versa. I mean, I would say the biggest movie that I did that really kind of made an initial splash is Weekend at Bernie's.
sure.
So that's always. I mean, I'm not necessarily obviously I'm not the star of that. So Andrew McCarthy and Jonathan Silverman, but we've done a few, and Terry Kaiser, of course, who's
Sure.
brilliant. I feel like
Yes. The hardest
we've done
job in that movie.
I mean, literally, it proves what a great actor he is. Because if he can sort of, as a dead guy, upstage the two actors that are working around him, you know,
Sure.
which I felt like he kind of everybody's eyes just went on Bernie because he's hilarious,
Yeah.
and that is a sign of an incredible actor. It's similarly in the Last Starfighter, Greg,
Yeah.
who he was just covered in rubber, you know, and very little flexibility in terms of what you can do with your face and expressions and things like that. And I mean, I had that one scene with him, but from what I understand, he spent a lot of time just working in front of a mirror to
Mm.
create different moods. And like when you see him laugh, he shrugs his shoulders and he tilts his head, and you see it in his eyes, you know, and in his mouth. But when you consider how little movement he actually could produce under all those prosthetics, it's pretty. He created such a brilliant character
Yes.
that we all just loved.
hmm Yeah. Heartwarming. And you were saying you
Heartwarming.
think and you're saying the Bernie's fans may be the biggest of the bunch of the films that you've been in.
Oh yeah, yeah. I would say it was, you know, it's probably the uh, widest known, let's say. And it's what's so funny about Bernie's is that it's referenced all the time. It's been
Yes.
referenced
Yes.
in so many different ways on so many, you know, platforms. Of course, politics, because
Yes.
that's an easy one. To, you know, Friends, it was Joey's favorite movie. When
Right.
they had there was some episode where they were doing guess the favorite movie, and somebody did guess for Joey Night of the Comet, and he was sort of they kind of groaned, but it was so funny. I that cracks me up every time I see a reference to Weekend at Bernie's. Even during COVID, and you know how um, games like baseball games and things like that put weird
Oh,
tape
right.
cutouts in
Yes.
the audience?
Right.
Bernie was in there.
Right. Yes, I remember that.
Do
You're
you
right.
remember that?
Yes. They'd have him
That
behind
was
the dugout and
so.
yeah, right. So he'd be on camera a lot. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
I love it. I love it.
Do you notice, are your fans still mostly of a certain age, generation, or are you getting younger fans that are finding these films?
Well, a lot of the younger fans are introduced to the films through their parents. And with like The Last Starfighter, a lot of the kids who are so used to CGI and the special effects that are so sophisticated these days, they kind of that distracts them from the story, I think, a little bit.
Mm,
They kind of groan at that. But a lot of the kids of the original audience, they kind of get into it because I think their parents are so enthusiastic about it, and you can't help it. If you can sort of sit back and go, okay, so these were simplistic, they were groundbreaking at the time. I
sure.
mean, I'm sure you know that whole thing about the CGI in The Last Starfighter was really groundbreaking.
Right.
I mean, they were creating programs as we were shooting, and they weren't even sure if they were going to use these new, computer style special effects or just use the traditional special effects. So that was a thing. But and apparently the technicians that created this stuff were on a really tight schedule, and they had wished that they'd had more time. They feel like the rock that they were flying in through in outer space, trying to avoid the bad guys. They felt like it looked like sort of melted chocolate ice cream, which it did a little bit, but I mean, they just ran out of time to really refine the work that they did. But that's another thing that I'm proud to be a part of is that it's truly groundbreaking work.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Now every time I watch it, I'm going to see melted ice cream. I hadn't thought of
I
that.
know, I know, I know,
Right.
I know.
Yeah.
Me neither until I think we were celebrating the 25th anniversary of the movie, and they did a screening in Santa Monica in California, and I happened to be in LA at the time, so I went. And that was actually the first time I knew any of this stuff because
Okay.
they had a Q&A afterwards, and all the technicians were up there describing what it was that they went through. And I was just like, oh, I had no idea. I had no idea
Right.
that all this stuff was going on behind the scenes.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think Lance mentioned they kept it from you because they didn't want anybody to panic. Like we don't know how we're going to pull off 50% of the film or 30% of the film.
I know, it's true. Somebody sent me a bunch of, I guess, Polaroids from the shoot.
Oh
There's
wow.
going around, there's a bunch of original photos from the set. And there's one photo of the spaceship that he lands with, in the trailer park.
Right.
And it's just legs. It's these legs that they'd kind of built and then said, we don't know what this is going to look like yet, but this is the landing portion of the spacecraft. And just look above that. And then they set up this huge fan, one of those giant fans. And this was in the desert in
Oh.
California, right? So they turn that thing on, and it's just blowing dirt and dust in our faces. I mean, it looked great, but I was like, okay, I may go blind after
Right.
this, but
Yep.
so just Nick Castle was to say, look up there in that general area, and the wind was blowing, and you just sort of had to imagine what it might look like, and then they put in the CGI afterwards.
Right. Wow. And it looks fantastic. Yeah. I imagine they were terrified of the gear. I would think, check the gate. I mean, it's filled with sand, but yeah.
You would think
Yeah.
so. Yeah, I think that's a very good
They
point.
had it wrapped up.
But they back in the day, they had that kind of, 35 millimeter film cameras were huge,
Yeah.
but they must have, I don't know. I don't remember how they did that, but they definitely figured it out.
Right. So, and I'll start to wrap up here. So I did talk to, as I mentioned, I talked to John Betchel not too long ago,
I
and
know.
he's elusive, right? He's hard to track down, but when you track him down,
Yeah.
he appears. It's almost like he's like Beetlejuice. I had to keep saying his name, but
It's great.
you
Yeah,
know,
no, I love him.
when I first talked to you a couple of years ago, there was it was starting in 2018. There was talk about a sequel to Last Starfighter, and then it hasn't materialized. So I
Mm.
got worried. And with the 40th anniversary, I had talked to John a few years ago, so I reached out to him again and said, "Do we have any encouraging update? Who do we have to sue?" And he
Yeah,
did have
right.
a very encouraging update saying that he believed that every loose end that had to be tied has now been tied, and they're
Oh,
able to move forward. He knows what rights he has. He knows what rights other folks have, and they're working together slowly to get another story out there.
yeah.
And his hope is
That's
that you and
exciting.
Lance will still be a part of it, and maybe even Nick.
Yeah.
So you're up
That
for
would
it
be
then?
fantastic.
Okay,
Oh my
yeah.
gosh, are you kidding? That would
Hmm.
be great. I mean, yes, you're right. We've been talking about it for years. I think, I don't even know what year it was the first time Nick and I and Lance went for lunch, and he was describing what a sequel might look like. But it had to be 10 years ago
Right.
at least. So and of course, the end of the movie really leaves it wide open for a sequel.
Yeah.
So, as the years go on, and even at different conventions that I was at with Nick and Lance, he's at Q&As, he's mentioned it. So it's always been in the conversation. It's just never been this kind of tangible thing. And I'm
Right.
not and they can't really talk a lot about it. I mean, I know maybe little bits and pieces of what it might look like, and there's been some things online about what it might look like. But I'm so glad that Jonathan Betchell will still be involved, because
Hmm.
I feel like that will keep to the integrity of the original piece. Of course, it's going to be much more sophisticated. I don't think there'll be the melted chocolate ice cream so
They
much.
have to, for continuity purposes, use a melted chocolate.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
But I think I hope it'll stay with the integrity of the original film, in that it'll be grounded in, reality that people can relate to on some level. I'm sure there'll be lots of space junk as well, but,
right.
you know, um, to me, that's kind of like the key with The Last Starfighter is the characters are people, you can see, you can feel,
Right.
you can relate to.
Yeah, I said everything that John said seemed to be encouraging in that regard. One, they got to deal with him. He's got the control of the U.S. rights. So, but the other thing is
That's
that,
very
like he
good.
said, yeah, let's just he wants to think of what really happened 40 years later. Let's not
Yeah.
pretend. Let's really think about what happened, and where
Yeah.
we pick up with these characters. So, uh, oh
Yeah.
shoot. And hey, you look, you're doing conventions, and I'm very excited to sort of let everybody know that you're going to be at RetroCon in Oaks, PA, in just a couple of weeks at the beginning of September.
That's right.
And
With Lance.
with
Yep.
Lance, yes. I mean, do
Yes.
you guys make frequent appearances together?
Yeah, we sure try to. And I also, and Kelly Maroney might be there. In fact, I think Kelly Maroney's going to
Right.
be there as
You're
well.
right.
So that's fantastic. Yeah, we try to do, certainly I think draws a crowd, if the two of us are doing something together, and same with Kelly. So yeah, we try to coordinate that as much as we can. So we're doing RetroCon September, and in October we're doing one in I don't know what it's called now, but it's in Richmond, Virginia,
Okay.
in October. So it'd be great to, and Lance is doing that one as well. I'm not sure if Kelly's doing that one yet, but yeah, it'd be great to see him again.
Yeah. Well, we'll be sure to make sure we share the links to all that. And I guys, I'm hoping
Yeah.
I could fit this small version in my suitcase. I've got this little mini Last Starfighter.
Oh,
Maybe I
I
get
love
see if I
it. I
can't get
love
you and
it.
Lance to sign it for me.
Oh, so
Uh,
are you going to be there,
oh yeah,
RetroCon?
I am. Yeah, me and my show will be
Oh,
there. We're going to do a panel, and
oh yes, yes, you
we'll be
mentioned that. You did. You mentioned that.
yeah. So yeah, it'd be great
Sorry,
to say hi and
I know.
encourage everybody. Gosh, so many
Yeah.
fans of these films from 40 years ago. I'm so glad that that they still have. Look, from my perspective, certainly they deserve to be as popular as they are today, and I'm so glad that they continue to find new fans. It was great chatting with you. Thank you so much for your time today,
Yeah, really
Catherine.
nice to chat with you too. Thanks so much.